I'm all right, and I'm really sorry, but I'm going to start this episode off by apologising to everybody
Oh, why?
because, as a fellow listener, I
Yeah.
listened. I've only just listened to the episode that came out, part one of the corpses,
Yeah.
House of a Thousand Corpses, and I thought I'll listen to it on my dog walk this morning because we're doing part two, so it'd be good to have a little catch up.
Yes.
And I'm really sorry, but that whole menopause speech at the beginning was so boring to listen to.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm really sorry.
We've uh, we've really let
We've run
everyone
out of
down on
things
the
to
chat.
say.
I know.
I'm really, really sorry because I listened to it and I was like, fucking hell.
God, don't we go on?
God, don't we go on about shit?
I
And I'm
know.
really sorry to everybody out there. We will try harder.
Sorry, guys. Sorry, guys. The menopause is a big thing for us at the moment.
It's such a massive thing for us, but I get that it's not a massive thing for everybody else, and nobody wants to
Yeah.
hear about it. So
Yeah.
I'm
Sorry about
sorry.
that. We won't mention it again. That's it.
No, although fuck me, it's hot in here.
I'm
Could
having a
really do
hot
the menopause
wash.
blanket right now.
Yeah, exactly. Magic blanket.
Fucking hell. Other than that, I'm all right though, and I am
Good.
ready for this episode because I literally 5 minutes ago finished listening to part one, so I'm
Yeah.
ready and raring to go.
Well, there's loads to tell.
Oh, I can't wait! I can't wait. Random blams, go.
My blam pertains to the episode and the episode before, and it's about cremation. So, as a process, so the practice of cremation has been part of human culture for thousands of years, with different motivations to cremate loved ones. Several theories as to why we cremate our loved ones. One, some people do it because of spiritual and religious beliefs. Many cultures and religions view cremation as a way to purify the soul and facilitate the journey to the afterlife, like Hinduism, Buddhism, and Japanese Shinto and Buddhism. Cremation is seen as a way of returning the deceased back to nature and respect the transience of life. Another one, which I think is the most logical, is space and practical considerations. In urban environments where space is limited, cremation is often practiced uh, because of practical choice. So, in highly populated areas with land shortages or high burial costs, cremation offers an alternative to traditional burials. Ancient civilizations like Romans and Greeks often cremated their dead because it was part of a more practical situation, especially for soldiers that died far from home. So they would be cremated and then just their cremains would be sent back.
Didn't they start doing it because of disease?
That's one of them, yeah.
Mm.
So another reason would be symbolic meaning of fire. So for people like the Vikings, the burning of the dead, often on a pyre, was considered a noble way to transition warriors to the afterlife in Valhalla. And the one you were talking about is environmental and hygienic factors. So after battles or plagues, bodies couldn't be buried quick enough. So a cremation served as a practical hygienic solution. And in some cases, like during the Black Death in Europe, bodies were sometimes burned to prevent further outbreaks of the disease. There's also emotional and psychological factors, like cremation may be chosen for emotional reasons. Some people find the idea of a body decaying in the ground distressing and
Mm-hmm.
prefer the cremation as a cleaner, more respectful way to handle like someone's body. So some facts about cremation is it takes 28 gallons, which is 127 litres of fuel to burn a human body. A body is in a furnace for several hours, burning at this. when I say several, like 4 hours. The furnace burns at 1,600 degrees, give or take a couple of hundred either side. It burns everything except the bones. And a lot of people think, like I used to think, when you cremated someone, it just burned so hot that it just incinerated everything. But it actually doesn't. It doesn't burn the bones. The bones have to be placed into a pulverizer. And this is a machine that's got great big blades that break all the bone down into tiny fragments. And what you end up with is a dark, very coarse sand-like matter. And that is my blam.
Cool.
Ah,
My animals are being absolute arseholes today. Look at them.
she's back already.
But she didn't even eat any of her food. I don't know what she wants. Fuck off.
She don't want to fill up on cat food if she's got melon.
Oh, well, I've eaten all the melon now, so she's got nothing.
Oh, tell her that.
I've got nothing.
There's nothing for you here. Oh,
Oh, well, yours is there. What's going on?
hey.
So my random blam, thank you for that one, by the way, because that was really cool, actually.
Oh, you are welcome.
Because me and Josie obviously have questions, what do you want to happen? And I'd rather be buried.
Oh,
Because,
would you?
yeah, just because I think it's really nice to go and feel like that person's there
Yeah.
and I can visit them and talk to them and that person is physically there.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're cremated, that's it, you're gone. There's nothing left of your body. That ash just sitting on
Although
the side.
I think everyone's different, and I get that. But for me, when I first lost my mum, I couldn't stand the thought of, because when she passed away, she was in hospital. I couldn't stand the thought of leaving her in hospital. And it was just trying to get past that mental block of my mum, who that's what I cuddled. Do you know what I mean? It's like, even though I knew that my mum's spirit wasn't there anymore, it was just that thought of leaving her in the hospital. The thing that I associated with cuddling my mum was her body, her physical body, and that's what I was leaving in the hospital, and I hated it. But I've got her ashes here with me, and it makes me feel like she's here with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I would have dealt particularly well with the thought of leaving my mum like in the ground somewhere. I think I would have really struggled with that.
Yeah. It's also the question of who gets the ashes, especially if you've got siblings.
Yeah.
Who gets them, and then splitting it up, and
Mm.
that's not for me. One
No.
place to visit in the ground. Everyone knows where I am. Just come visit me when you want. That's what I want.
Okay. I mean, I think I do, as morbid and sad as it is, I do think things like that are important to discuss, at least, even if it's just a brief conversation, because you never know, do you? You can't put everything down to old age.
No, exactly.
You never know. Do you want to know what I want to do?
Go on.
I don't want to be cremated, and I don't want to be buried. I want to be stuffed and mounted.
Mounted.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would like to be put like in maybe like behind a door.
You're gonna be in the
like
fucking
that.
Cave of Mysteries, whatever it is that we went to.
Yeah, I want to be like mummified like that. Like that, so that when someone opens like a door, or particularly when they close the door, I could be mounted on the back of the door like that, so that when they close the door, I just like swing back with the door. And then they'll be too scared to go to the door. But yeah, that's what I'd like. Stuffed and mounted, please.
All right, done.
All right.
So my random blurb is much less morbid, but just quite interesting because it's something that we're all guilty of, and it is so everybody knows what procrastinating is. Everybody does it.
I do it all the time.
So I do it mostly when I'm going to write my story. I start writing it and then I'm like, oh, I'll just do this or I'll just do this. And I procrastinate and I'm procrastinating. And then I'm like, I'm recording tomorrow. Get it done.
I'm recording in an hour.
Get it done. But it says scientific studies suggest that procrastination is less a result of laziness or poor time management, but more likely a result of poor mood management. And I felt that. And I felt that people needed to know that, because when you procrastinate, you think, oh, it's because I'm being lazy.
Yeah.
It's not. It's poor mood management. That's all.
Yeah, but
you're not lazy.
Isn't that just like you're in a lazy mood and you're not managing whether or not you're being lazy or not?
No, that's not what the scientific study says.
Okay. So we have to manage our mood better.
Just manage your mood better, just a little bit. But I'm not in the mood to do it right now.
I won't do it right now, but I'll manage my mood later.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'll do that later. I'll do that later, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
If I can be bothered.
Mood depending.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, cool.
All right. Random labs, done.
Done. I should have done this bit first, really. So sorry about that. Trigger warning. And then I went and spoke about like cremations and everything. But anyway, this episode contains some graphic descriptions of corpses. I will talk in some detail about the condition of cadavers. I'll also be covering details and descriptions about cremation. Done it. If this is something you are not comfortable with or you may find upsetting, please skip this episode. Also, if you are eating or planning to eat anytime soon, maybe if you're like me and you're not like Sarah, leave it a little bit. I won't be going into like disgusting detail in this one, so it should be fine. You'll be fine. Just listen. You'll be fine. Morning, everyone.
Morning.
A chilly morning in the UK for all of you that are not in the UK.
No, but also,
very sunny.
But can we just put a little shout out to the people of America at the moment, because they've got horrendous hurricane going. So
that is
keep
true.
To high ground, keep safe.
Oh, please be
sandbags.
Careful. Are you calling me sandbags? I've got my new bra on, thank you. Florida, oh my goodness, they are really under it at the moment, aren't they? Jeez.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's terrifying because there's nothing you can do about the weather, is there? Absolutely nothing. So I will take chili over all that hurricane malarkey.
Yeah, as much as we moan about the weather here, we don't get storms like that, do we?
No. And I appreciate a lot of our listeners must think, for God's sake, they're always moaning and they're always moaning about the weather. But that's because we're English and that's what
we do. What else would we talk about if we did not talk about the weather?
And we have to be moaning about it. We have to moan when it's hot. We have to moan when it's cold. We have to moan when it's raining. So, yeah. And sometimes we get that all in one day. So that's why. Yeah, how about that? Cool.
We've got another shout out though, on a bit of a happier note.
I was waiting.
New subscriber.
Woohoo!
Massive shout out to Kate. Not you, not yourself.
Oh.
To a better Kate.
Better?
She has subscribed to our little Blamily and now has full access to all of the additional Blam episodes and more. So welcome aboard.
Welcome and a huge thank you to one of my Kates, one of us, one of my people, that is.
My mate Kate.
I think we've probably got more Kates subscribed than we have Sarah's now. Yeah. I mean, don't want to make it a competition, but, you know.
All the Sarahs out there, get on board. Don't let me down.
Yeah, come on, Sarahs, where are you?
Yeah.
My cats are slapping each other. Hang on. What is it with the cats today? Why are our cats all like acting weird? There's something in
It
that.
must be the weather.
Must be the weather.
Must
Did you
be the
see the
weather.
Northern Lights last night?
Don't even get me started, Kate. Just
I mean,
carry on with it. I'm not having it.
cut.
Don't even.
Oh,
Fuming.
well, if it's any consolation, you couldn't see them with the human eye.
Yeah.
So we went outside, flipping freezing, because, English weather. Yeah, really cold, but beautiful, like clear, starry night. Just black sky.
It
Black.
is. You have to do all sorts of filters with your phone, and then you go, "Oh, I've seen the Northern Lights." You haven't. You've put load of filter on your phone.
No, but do you know what? It's not the filter. It's just you can only see it through, we can only see it through a camera on your phone. I didn't put any filters on mine. It was black, black, black sky. I put my phone up into the blackness, clicked take a picture, and then when I looked at it, beautiful pinks and purples.
Oh, stop it.
Honestly,
I tried
it's
to do
crazy.
that, and all I got was cloud.
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's cloudy, maybe it was your mood. Maybe that's why you had a cloud over you. Maybe. It was clear last night. You need to manage your mood, mate. Do it later, though.
Tell me about it.
I am going to start this episode with a story about a gentleman called Ira. And so, once upon a time, in 1979, a lovely lady called Sheila met Ira. They fell in love and they remained in love for many, many years. Sadly, in 1994, Ira was diagnosed with Huntington's disease. As he deteriorated, Sheila was by his side every single day. He had hospice care at home so that he could stay with his beloved Sheila and his children. This diagnosis was heartbreaking for his family, and they loved him unconditionally. Ira was a really, really good, kind soul. Ira made his plans for when his time came, as he knew it would. He stated to Sheila that he wanted to be cremated. He didn't want to be buried. He wanted his ashes scattered in his favourite place, other than at home with his family, was on top of this beautiful hill where he used to go hunting. He used to go shooting up there. One evening, as he laid in his hospital bed at home, he beckoned Sheila over to him, and in a broken, quiet whisper, he told the love of his life, "I love you." With tears in her eyes, Sheila said, "Well, I love you too." And I just need to say, Sheila is awesome. She's just the best person. I've read loads and loads and loads about her. She's amazing. But these confessions of "I love you" were the last words that they would ever speak to each other. Ira took one last deep breath and passed away. Sheila and her children had a beautiful funeral for Ira, and then Ira was sent down to Atlanta to be cremated. When they received Ira's ashes back, his family took them to his spot on the hill overlooking the mountains and scattered his ashes. They felt that they had got their closure that they needed, and now they could start dealing with the grief and sadness of losing Ira. A year and a half after losing Ira, Sheila saw the news about Tri-State and thought, thank God we took Ira to Atlanta and not Tri-State. But she carried on sitting there enjoying her evening and watching the telly, and she just felt that she couldn't settle, and she thought, I just need to make sure. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the funeral home that we used said that he'd been sent down to Atlanta. I'm sure it's fine. But as the evening went on, she just couldn't shake this feeling in her gut, and she thought, do you know what? I've got Ira's death certificate. I'll just go and check it. So she went off and she rifled through her important papers and she got Ira's death certificate out. And she was horrified to see that under the crematorium listed on his paperwork, it said Tri-State Crematory. Sheila and her family thought, we're going to have to go and see if, because this was in the same time period, we're going to have to drive just a short way to Noble and check out what's going on. So the church in Noble was full of families, much like Sheila, who had all lost loved ones and had been sent to Tri-State Crematorium. There was people all over the place. Nobody knew what was happening. The police were just completely out of their depth. They had ruled out necrophilia. So what crime could they actually charge Brent Marsh with? What was he actually guilty of? Kind of no one really knew, because they thought, well, it's not, he hasn't tampered with the bodies, so it's not,
defamation of a corpse.
Defamation of a corpse. He didn't kill anyone, so it wasn't like murder or anything like that. So
he's just been negligent in his job, really.
He has really. Yeah, but the police were like, don't really know what to charge him with, but I'm pretty sure he should be arrested. So they kind of arrested Brent and then thought, we need to find out what crime it is. So they were like, all right. Some of the bodies at Tri-State were identified straight away because, and this, I thought this was really sad, they still had hospital bracelets on.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh, that's so sad. But obviously it made it, I suppose, easier for the police and the families to identify their loved one straight away because it showed their names on it. The investigation and search for bodies was estimated at taking around 8 to 9 months and costing several millions of dollars. The governor declared a state of emergency for the state of Georgia. Brent got arrested on the Saturday and then made bail. And then he was arrested again on the Sunday, and he was charged with 11 counts of deception. Because I suppose that kind of makes sense, because he was deceiving people all over the place. While he was in jail, they then rearrested him with another 102 counts. The police questioned Brent extensively about what he's done, but Brent kind of remained stoic. And he was likened by the police that had contact with him. They said he was kind of like a bit of an innocent child. Like, he didn't come across as like this evil monster. He was just like a deer caught in the headlights. He was like, it was like he didn't know what to say. Greg, do you remember Greg from part one? The agent that was with the GBI. He said to Brent, listen, if you don't explain this, people are going to make up some reasons of their own and they won't be good. And Greg said that Brent sort of then said, well, that's all right. Like, he wasn't bothered that people were going to think and make up all these bad, hideous things about him that might not be true. He was just like, that's all right. If they do that, that's fine. And Greg was like, all right. So the search continues. They found many pits dug on the grounds that had around 30 to 40 bodies in. They found an upside down pool table with a tarpaulin that had several bodies in it. they
Can I
had.
interject?
Of course.
I'm pretty certain it's more effort to dig a hole and fill it with 30 bodies than it is to just cremate them. And it's not like they couldn't afford the fuel because they were still buying the fuel.
Do you know what? I would love to say, don't worry, like I've
That's
got the answer
explained.
to that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can explain that. There's so many things about this case and so many people that are asking these same questions. But yeah, I'll get to somewhat of a conclusion at the end. But
Okay.
yeah, I all I've got to say is I agree. I
All right.
agree. I don't know why he would dig these massive pits when he could have just gone, in you go. Who knows? Most of the bodies were just laid out in the woods. And that I get because he's like, I don't want them near crematory.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just literally put them on a trolley, wheel them over, and then lay them nicely in the woods. I get that, but
I wonder because I don't know what the process of a crematory is, but is it not a bit like a morgue when they've got the bodies stored in a fridge and then one by
no,
one they'll
no. I mean, some of them might be,
because they
but
must have a storage location. They're not just going to have one body at a time.
actually, they absolutely do because they can't have the risk of getting bodies mixed up.
Yeah.
So, from what I read and researched, crematoriums or crematories will only have one body in the crematorium at one time to save any cross contamination, not contamination, but
Yeah.
cross mix up with any of the ashes or bodies or anything. So they will literally, the funeral home they prepare the body, do all of that, then they take it to the crematorium, or the crematorium will go to the funeral home, collect the body, bring it back, cremate them there and then,
Yeah.
get the ashes, and then send the ashes to the family or send them back to the funeral home.
Yeah.
And then the funeral home does that. But
Like
that's,
one in, one out.
yeah, one in, one out. And that's a thing to stop any kind of like crossover. So, as I said, most of the bodies were just laying out in the woods. Some of them had tarps over. Some were literally just laying there as they are. But most of these bodies that were in the woods had been buried by woodland debris. So there weren't really, you couldn't really look across the woodland and go, there's one, there's one, there's one, there's one. I can see them all laying around. There was quite a lot of leaves and twigs and things that were over the top of them. But the worst discovery was in a structure on the Marsh property called the Butler Building. When Greg and his fellow officers entered, they smelt the most horrendous smell that you ever did smell. And it was so bad that Greg said, even if you just walked in that building, this smell that was so burny and gross would literally stick to the clothes that you were wearing. Like he said, you'd go in the building, you'd think, I can't breathe. I feel like I'm going to pass out. And you would come out and like walk around in the air and you could just feel it emanating out of your clothes. He said it was, if you went in there and you weren't wearing like sort of PPE, some kind of like overalls or something like that, he said you pretty much had to get your clothes off at the end of the night and burn them because you couldn't even wash that shit out. He said that when they went in there, their eyes were watering straight away, really stinging. And he wondered where the hell that stench was coming from. It was completely unlike the smell of these other bodies that they'd already found. And that's when they noticed several vaults. And burial vaults was a side to the business that Brent's father, Ray, had created. So he actually made these great big vaults, burial vaults. So they had some of them still in these outbuildings. And these vaults were about 7 foot long, 3 feet deep, couple of feet wide. So they were substantial, they were big. And as Greg and his officers got closer to these vaults, Greg said that the smell was so bad that it almost felt like it was burning their skin. He said it was like a toxic smell, like more fumes than smell. He said it was really, really hard to breathe. And he said that he kind of gulped and said, oh God, there's going to be bodies in these too. When they managed to get one of the vaults open, he said it was just full of bodies and they were all piled in there on top of each other. And because they'd been trapped in these vaults, the decay was putrid. And he said the bodies were just revolting, you know, not to be disrespectful, but essentially they'd kind of made a bit of a slow cooker with these vaults.
Yeah, we done some like liquid and slush and
heating up, and he said it was just awful. And then he said Greg said his heart sank when he sort of looked up from all these bodies being piled into this vault. He said his heart sunk because he noticed that there were several other vaults that were all kind of stacked up and leaning against the walls and everything behind this one that they'd just found. And he just knew that they were all going to be full of bodies as well. And they were. Hundreds of families were desperate to find out if their family members were actually in the urns that they had at home, or were their family members part of this absolute horror scene at Tri-State Crematory. Families found out that the ashes that they thought they had scattered and they had in beautiful decorative urns weren't actually the ashes of their loved ones. They were actually cement dust. So Brent had actually gone to the trouble of creating something that looked like ashes, putting them in, in containers, and then sending those to the family saying, this is your loved one. But their loved one was actually stacked up in an outbuilding, in a pit, or, stuffed in a vault.
I just don't understand. To go to that length of retrieving the body, having the body at the crematory, filling up paying for the gas and everything, and having that working furnace there, but then just filling it full of cement dust and sending it back. I just don't understand.
Oh, I know. So when all this was coming to light, people wanted answers. They demanded answers. Sheila was among these families. Forums about the atrocities at Tri-State started up, and Sheila was one of the members on there, and she wrote Monster Marsh about Brent. She felt furious at the thought of her beloved Ira, and they'd spent their whole lives together, loving each other. She was his person and he was her person. And she couldn't stand the thought of Ira being chucked into a heap of rotting bodies when his dying wish was to be cremated and given a respectful, loving send-off. And then he wanted his family to be able to grieve for him. The whole case held huge emotion by so many people, hundreds of people. And the police officers that were part of the investigation were completely scarred for life, because you think about what they must have witnessed and what they must have seen. Horrendous. A lot of the police were from that area, so they were, discovering bodies and moving these bodies that were part skeletal. Some of them were part mummified, And these were people that they knew. They knew from their town. You know, it might have been people that they'd grown up with, teachers, family, friends, all of that. You know, these officers were searching through just body parts sometimes to look for a hint that they might be able to identify them. The states surrounding Tri-State Crematory were in total uproar. And like we said before, more than anything, people just wanted answers. No one could understand just why. Why? Why not just cremate them? Why not do your only job? You had one job and that was it. Why didn't you just do it? The authorities went looking for the reason for Brent's actions because Brent wasn't talking. One of the first things to investigate was the Marsh's furnace. So they enlisted the help of an expert in cremations from a nearby state, and his name was Chuck. And he was from Nashville. And he said, best thing I can do is to just come and look at the furnace itself, because that is the heart of any crematory. So Chuck explained to the authorities, you must maintain a crematorium's furnace, always. It's something that if it's not well maintained, and there's things in there called fire bricks, which is like insulation, basically. So the fire is, you have them in any open fire. We've got them in in both our fires. And he said, if the fire bricks wear down, which they do, the 1,600 degree heat for like 3 hours or so would eventually start to melt the steel, like all around the furnace. That would melt, which would then let air in and oxygen, which would have a similar effect to like opening a window in a house fire. So if you've got a house fire going on and you think, oh, there's smoke everywhere, I need to like quickly put it out. Even if you think you've put it out, do not open the window to get rid of the smoke.
It's called backdraft, isn't it?
Exactly. So you get a massive influx of fresh new oxygen, and it then ignites. So so don't do that.
Don't do it.
So this would have the same effect as that. You get a sudden intake of oxygen because the steel has melted, and the whole furnace would then explode in a huge fireball. So he said, you know, that would have been any person that owns a crematorium or works in one. That is their fear, is that oxygen is going to get into the furnace and it's going to explode and it'll burn the whole place down. Chuck said that when he looked at the Marsh's furnace, it was not in any kind of good working order. It was rusty. It had big holes in it. There were large cracks in the bricks, big holes in the floor of it. And also, as I told you about in the Blam, the bones after a cremation would need to be taken out and then put into a pulverizer. Chuck found no pulverizer anywhere. He did, however, find quite a small wood chipper. In this wood chipper, he found many bone fragments. So he did state a wood chipper, it would do the job of a pulverizer. So it might be, you know, I suppose I use the word good loosely. It would be
adequate.
Adequate to use as a pulverizer. However, he said the reason that we don't use wood chippers and we do use pulverizers is because you need to get all of the bone fragments. You know, when people send their loved ones to be cremated, they want at least, 99.9% of their loved one back. They don't just want some of it, you know, but he said a wood chipper would literally just spray pieces of it everywhere. So it would be an inefficient way of dealing with the bones. Hundreds and hundreds of people worked on the team investigating Tri-State, just trying to identify and store all of the bodies. And obviously they were still looking, they were still finding pits, they were still finding bodies. So, you know, as more and more bodies were building up, they were having teams that could try and identify them. There was people using DNA testing. So they were testing the bodies for DNA, and then they were speaking to all these families and saying, look, we need samples of all your DNA so that we can identify loved ones. Counsellors, legal teams, police deputies, hospital staff, there was so many people. They were all called to help, and they all got involved and did their bit. At the first court hearing, when the charges were being given and read to Brent Marsh, everyone was outraged. Like, the police had to really look after Brent because, you know, people were fuming. And
so was Brent's dad dead by this time?
No, he wasn't dead, but he'd had a stroke.
Okay.
I don't think it was anyway. Yeah, he had a very bad stroke. So he couldn't really function with anything. So the first court hearing, when the charges were read to Brent Marsh, a family member, one of the many fuming, entered the court using a cane. And because everyone kind of knows everyone around these parts, one of the police officers thought, that's weird. I've never seen her use a cane to walk with before. So on a gut feeling, he approached her and said, can I have a look at that cane before you go in? Yeah, it turns out it had a dagger in it. Like, people were fucking fuming.
That's so funny.
Yeah, walked in with a cane, and everyone was like, huh?
Stabby cane.
What's Karen doing with a cane? Yeah, and they went over and had a flipping, like, pull-out dagger in it. But yeah, everyone was super emotional. Everyone was angry, as, you know, rightly so. Rightly so. I would be fucking seething. Every day of the investigation brought about more and more bodies, more and more horrors, and more work. They began to put the body pieces together to make up full bodies. And then their job was try and notify, like, the family of, you know, who they are, notify the family. And then comes the actual cremation of the body. And then they had to obviously make sure that they gave those remains to the right family and go, right, this is finalised. But you imagine hundreds and hundreds of bodies, and you've got to try and do that for each of them. It's just massive, massive amount of work. As they identify bodies, they can work out when they died. And this was important because they wanted to try and work out if Brent's father, Ray, had also been doing it. After much investigation through identifying them and looking to see if they're recent deaths or deaths from before the years of Brent, the authorities found that all of the bodies that they had found so far were just in the years that Brent was running the crematory. So Ray was pretty much like off the hook. All of this was due to Brent. And at this point in the search, they discovered deeper burial pits, deeper and wider than the ones before. Would these pits bring up more bodies, older bodies, bodies from Ray's time of running the crematorium? Well, as I said in part 1, the body count had reached 339 when all the funding for the investigation came to a halt. The cost was then going to be billed to FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. And FEMA said, nah, we don't want to pay for that. So,
Right.
and they went, okay, well, what do you want us to do then? Because we've been finding more and more of these like burial pits and that. And they went, no, just stop. And they were like, okay, but I mean, we're actively each day we're finding more bodies of these, you know,
People's loved ones.
people's loved ones and that. And they went, no, I mean, you know, the crematorium's gonna be shut down for this anyway. These people were like dead, and we don't really want to be paying out millions of dollars. So you've done enough. That's it.
That's crazy.
So, as sad as it is to say, that is where the body count stops at the magic number of 339. But many people believe that there would have been many bodies, because it wasn't that they stopped when they'd stopped finding them.
Yeah.
You know, they were literally stopped in their tracks and said, right, down tools, everyone, we're out of here. And it literally stopped as that. And they said 339 bodies, that's enough.
That's crazy.
But I mean, I've put in my notes, all of this, it comes down to money. Like everything. I got the rage right in this because I was like, oh, everything comes down to money at the end of the day. And it's infuriating. It couldn't have been a case of finding the truth.
It's money or publicity.
Yeah. But ultimately, publicity comes down to money as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm going to throw this in here.
Right.
And I don't know if you've watched it or not, but there's the Menendez brothers documentary.
I haven't watched it yet because I've been immersed in Tri-State. But
that gave me the rage, the absolute rage, because of how the trial was done.
Right.
The first trial was every piece of evidence was allowed in there. The evidence of their horrific upbringing, their sexual abuse by their dad, and everything was allowed in there. And it went to a mistrial. The jury couldn't decide whether it was manslaughter or first-degree murder. So it went to a mistrial.
Right.
By the time the second trial came along, they'd had the OJ trial. Okay. And OJ was acquitted. And that gave everyone the ick. They was like, he shouldn't have been let go. He absolutely did it. And the judge was embarrassed because that's now the second time he hadn't gotten or he'd gotten acquittal.
Hadn't got a result.
Got a result. He hadn't got anyone. So when it was time for the Menendez's second trial, he went, I'm not going to allow any evidence in of the sexual abuse. That's irrelevant. Their trauma is irrelevant to their crime. You can't use battered woman syndrome because they're not women. So I don't want to hear about any of it.
Okay. I don't know anything about the case. So
honestly, watch it. It's infuriating because it was a publicity stunt. It wasn't based on the truth. It wasn't based on the evidence. It was a publicity stunt to ensure that they got a conviction. And like you said about the cremation, they just went, no, I don't. Let's just not bother. Don't even worry about it.
Yeah.
Don't worry about digging
up. The hype's dying down anyway.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, just leave it.
I don't want any more of this publicity. You found enough. It looks bad on the local. It looks bad on the county. That's just not bother.
Oh, honestly, it takes the piss. It really does. I mean, just keep looking. Do you know what I mean? Just come on. Even if you're not identifying them, at least find them. You know, these people have been really, in my books, really disrespected.
I guarantee if somebody working at FEMA had a loved one that had been cremated at Tri-State, they would have gone,
That's how I felt.
no,
Yeah.
keep looking.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, just keep going. I mean,
Okay.
you wouldn't be able to keep me away from that. I'd be like, right, you're stopping funding, right? Where's my shovel?
Yeah,
Where's
I'm
my
going.
shovel?
I'm going
I'm
off the
going.
clock.
I would. I'd be going over there, and I'd be like, do you know what? I'm just going to keep digging up
Yeah.
holes in the land. But I mean, I'm pretty sure I'd have been shot by now. And there, so okay. So I'm just going to head back to Sheila and Ira. So Ira had passed away and been sent to Tri-State right in the time when all these bodies were being dumped on the Marshes land by Brent. So Sheila was like, I do not want my beloved Ira to stay wherever he's been dumped. I want him back, and I want to give him a proper cremation, which is what Ira wanted, and that's it. I want Ira back. Whatever the condition, I want him back. So Ira's children gave samples of their DNA, and Sheila gave the authorities x-rays of Ira's so that they could identify, hopefully, find him and identify him amongst all these hundreds of bodies. Brent, it turns out, had put Ira outside in the grounds of the crematory with a tarp over him. They found what they suspected could be Ira, and his body was badly decayed. Local animals had pulled him around a little bit. They'd pulled the tarp half off of him. So Ira was actually half mummified and the other half was skeleton. He was also missing his right arm altogether. No doubt it had been feasted on by
Yeah.
animals and dragged off somewhere, which I'm sure happened to many, many of the bodies. And the problem was there were so many other bodies around Ira that his arm could also have been mixed up with the parts of another body and like taken off. A local well, not local, but a nearby crematorium said that they were going to do free cremations for all the bodies that were found at Tri-State, which I thought was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
So Sheila, without Ira's right arm, Sheila arranged to have Ira's body collected by this crematorium while the team continued to look for Ira's arm. And just going to slot in here, but January 2003, they found Ira's arm. It was actually like, I think 4 months after Ira had been cremated, they found Ira's arm in the sort of body debris about a mile away from his body.
Gosh.
So it had been taken quite a long way, but
Yeah.
they did find his arm, and I found out that they'd very neatly put it in, you know, like the Jiffy envelopes.
Jeez.
They put it in a Jiffy envelope, yellow envelope, and took it and gave it to
Here you go.
to Sheila, and she was like, oh, okay. And then she had his arm cremated as a separate thing,
Yeah.
which I thought was really cute. So there was one point where Sheila is at Tri-State and she goes there for like a visual ID of Ira's body. She said that she recognised certain bits about him. She recognised that there was a little bit of like plaid material, and she recognised that as Ira's boxer shorts that he did have on when he was sent for cremation. She recognised a small dental implant. Those kind of little things that she was like, that is definitely him. So while she was there going through this horrendously traumatic, I can't even imagine how traumatic that must have been for her. Brent Marsh's attorney turns up, and Sheila is very upset by this because everybody hated this attorney because he was fighting for Monster Marsh.
Mm-hmm.
So
what defense is there?
Yeah. And she was fuming. She was like, I can't believe that he would turn up when I'm standing here looking at what that monster did to my Ira. And this guy's rocking up. Apparently, by all accounts, Brent's attorney was a bit of a showman. Like he loved a bit of showboating and all that. And years before, he had, I think, don't quote me on this, but he'd like run for like governor or something like that, or run for mayor or something to do with politics. And he lost by like a huge like landslide for the other guy, you know. Yeah, he had a spectacular loss. And he said that since then he kind of hated the people of Noble.
Oh.
Like he was proper bitter and twisted about it.
I think they felt the same.
Yeah, so his thinking was, well, you're all hating this Monster Marsh.
Yeah.
I'm going to defend him. See how you like that. So do you know what I mean? It was a bit of a,
if you already hate me anyway, so it's not going to make any difference.
yeah, but it was almost like a bit of a vendetta against the people of Noble, because he was like, you know, like a revenge thing. Like, I'm going to defend Brent Marsh as a bit of a middle finger up to you all.
Yeah.
Like, how do you like me now? So, yeah, so he was hated. Sheila thought, what the fuck is he doing here? How dare he? Like, he's like, timing for this couldn't have been worse. So she was like, right, he can get the fuck out. So Sheila's attorney was with her as well. So he was like, wait, I'll deal with him. So he went over and he was like, listen, mate, you've made an upsetting time for her 100 times worse. Just get lost. He was like, all right. So he went. A few days later, Sheila got a call from Brent's attorney. His name's McCracken. So he called Sheila to actually apologise. And Sheila thought, don't really want to talk to this prick, but if he's going to, like, if this big showman, fancy man wants to actually phone me up to apologise, then all right, I'll hear it. Let's hear your apology. So anyway, he apologises and he says, I'm sorry about that. And she says, do you know what? If you're going to apologise, tell me a bit about Brent. And he's like, what? I shouldn't really be talking about like my client, you know, and all that. And she was like, look, if you want me to try and see things as a bigger picture, tell me about him. You know, you haven't got to tell me anything, you know, secret. So he was like, all right. So he starts talking to her about Brent, and she's asking him, he says how close Brent is to his family, how much he loves his parents, how he was never really given a choice about his future at the crematorium. He had a promising football career that he really wanted to pursue. And Sheila had thought of Brent as Monster Marsh for doing this to her darling Ira, and how he'd ruined so many families and been so disrespectful. But after this phone call and this conversation, she couldn't stop thinking about Brent from a slightly different view, how he was just a kid, really. And he was a kid with a mother who was a beloved school teacher. You know, Brent's mum had been a school teacher to many of the people, many of the families that had been victim to Brent's actions. He was a kid with a father who had suffered a stroke and was unable to continue his business that he'd spent years building. And maybe, just maybe, he was a kid that couldn't cope, but had no one there to support him. A kid who was very alone, but very aware that he was out of his depth. And maybe he wasn't a monster. Sheila decides to go and sit with her son, and she says to him, quote, "If I asked you to do anything for me, would you?" And her son says, "Yeah, you're my mama. Of course I would." And she says, "What about if I asked you to kill someone for me? Would you?" And her son says, "Well, yeah, because I love you. So yeah, I'd do anything for you." During all this, 2 years have passed since they found the first bodies at Tri-State, and Brent's trial begins. The defence state that this is McCracken, not Phil. McCracken, defence attorney. He states that a human body of a deceased family member cannot be property, so Brent should not be charged with theft. He states that no one can own a corpse. The charges and sentence for Brett started that he would serve a term of 8,000 years. But Brent's lawyer states, what's the point of that?
Like, I've never understood that.
What's the point?
I give someone 5 life sentences that equate to 300 years. What's the point?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I get if they said 100 years and you'd be like, all right, well, they've got an overlap just in case. Do you know what I mean? Because, I mean, Brent's mother was old by the time this court case was going on. She was like 95.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, all right, well, I get if they make a bit of an overlap, but 8,000 years. So obviously Brent's lawyer was like, well, that's ridiculous. So they begin negotiations. Brent actually said to his lawyer, let's just do it. Send me to jail. Don't drag this out for everyone and make it a super long trial. Everyone's been through enough. And his lawyer was like, no, mate, I'm fighting this. Stay out of this. So Brent agrees to a plea deal, and he says that he will plead guilty to 787 counts, including 122 counts of burial service fraud, 179 counts of abuse of a corpse. Only 179 though, not all of them. So I feel like some of them might have been tampered with a little bit more than others. So anyway, after he's given these 787 counts, then a sentence will be given after that.
It could have been that they hadn't identified the other corpses. They could only identify 179.
Yeah, possibly, yeah.
That's the only reason, because the same as like murder victims, if they can't be identified, then they don't get charged with that murder.
That's true. That probably is the case then, yeah. In 2004, Brent pleads guilty, and the families are super hoping for not only strict and harsh punishment for Brent. In my notes, I had to change that because I put vengeance. And then I thought, oh no, it's not vengeance, is it? It's revenge. And I put revenge in, and then I thought, oh no, it's not revenge, is it? It's just like justice. Yeah. So they wanted strict and harsh punishment for Brent. But also, more than anything, they wanted answers from him. They just wanted to know why. Like, he had everything he needed. Why didn't he just do it?
Yeah.
Brent makes a statement in court, and it says, quote, "To those individuals who are genuinely harmed emotionally as a result of my actions, I apologize." He also says that he cannot give the families and the court the answers that they want. But he adds, not for a lack of desire to give those answers.
He didn't know himself why he'd done it.
I don't know. I've got suspicion. Well, I've got a couple of suspicions, but yeah, we'll have a conversation about it at the end. But yeah, I mean, not for a lack of desire to give those answers. He wants to. He's not. Sheila is among the families in the courtroom, and she, along with many others, are wanting and waiting to give their speech to the judge about how Brent's actions or lack of actions have impacted them. So the judge said, ultimately, we'll see the evidence, we'll hear from the families, anyone that wants to speak may speak. But, you know, the prosecution can go at Brent for like 8,000 years and, you know, die in prison and all this. But ultimately, it's down to me as the judge to make a decision. So I can rule against that, or I could increase it. I could go, nope, 10,000 years. No, 16,000. So it was all down to the judge. But he wanted to hear from everyone. So he was like, look, if you've been affected by this, I want to hear it. So as everyone's sitting in the court and families are going up and they're speaking, they're saying about how much they hate Brent and want him to burn in hell for all eternity, Sheila's sitting there and she's thinking a slightly different way about Brent. She's maybe seeing him from just a different perspective. She is sitting, considering the conversation that she had with her son, thinking about, what if I'd left this business to my son and said, continue to build the business for me, son? Would her son have done it, even though he didn't want to? Probably. Maybe definitely. After Brent's father had a stroke, it was left to Brent's elderly mother to take everything over, because obviously it was a sudden stroke and he was suddenly not able to do anything for the business. And like I said, Brent's mother was already elderly. She was already like in her 80s by then. She couldn't do it. So Brent's mother was then sort of, you're going to have to take it over now. You're going to have to do it now. Brent's mother was so worried and so concerned that the business would collapse and fail. After all the blood, sweat and tears that Ray had shed to make it such a success, like the word obligated for Brent doesn't even cut it. So Sheila comes out of the courthouse and immediately calls Brent's attorney, and she says, what can I do to help Brent? Which I was like, blimey. The judge gives, on the next day, the judge gives the family members time to speak and vent. The families are angry beyond words, and they speak. They show photos of their loved ones as dismembered corpses. They speak about their trauma, their anger, their hurt. And even Brent Marsh's old football coach from college speaks out about his brother who had fallen victim to Tri-State. And his old coach says, I am just so disappointed in you, which is like the worst. It's the worst for someone that you love and respect to say to you, I'm just so disappointed in you. Mm-hmm. Daughters talk about seeing their dads as mummified cadavers, and they cry and howl on the stand. They want justice. Apparently they don't want vengeance. Well, some of them did with their daggers. They want nothing less than life in prison for Brent Marsh. Sheila sits and she listens, and the whole while is thinking about what she knows she is going to say when her turn comes around. Will she be lynched? She'll probably be hated. Will she be hated forever? Will she be banded as a traitor? Will she be forgiven? Most of all, will anyone see things from her side, from Brent's side. But she's a strong woman and she knows that she has to do the right thing. So the bailiff calls her name and she stands and she walks over, takes the stand. And she says, and this is a direct quote, "I keep waiting for this so-called closure, but it never came. I was full of hate and anger, and I had no direction to aim it at. Then finally the day came that I realised that I would never find it as long as I was full of hate and anger. So I had to let that go. Brent," and she turns to look at Brent and she says, "I want you to know that my family and I accept your apology. The most wonderful thing about being a mother is the fact that they love their children unconditionally. Even though they don't condone what their children do, they will always love them. I also think you are a very brave man to sit here and accept the punishment set forth by this judge. I think we've all been punished enough, and I include you in that statement. If it were up to me, you'd go home today, but I don't have the power to do that." End quote. The families were fucking seething by this. Oh my goodness, like proper moaning, calling out in disgust in the court. And at this point, like, the judge steps in and kind of calms everyone down and he says, "Listen, everyone's got the right to speak. Everyone's got the right to share their views and opinions, and not everyone has to agree with it." Sheila thanks the judge and she continues, quote, "The only thing I can offer you at this time, Brent, is my forgiveness and best wishes. Please know that not all of us want you to die in prison. I will never oppose your release on parole, and if there's anything that I can do, I am willing to do it. Thank you." And then she ends her speech there. Obviously, this was not a popular day for Sheila. She faced much shouting and aggressive language. So she didn't even go home. After this speech, there was a whole load of people parked outside her house, news vans, reporters, all sorts. So she was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go and have a break somewhere else for a bit." So she went off and stayed somewhere else. Anyway, the trial came to an end and Brent was sentenced to 12 years in prison. And he went off to prison without giving any answers at all as to why he did this. While he was in prison, his lawyer and Brent's whole sort of defence team kind of felt that they needed to come up with some kind of answer as to why Brent did this. And it was thought by like the defence team that Brent had suffered mild mercury poisoning from the cremations that he did when he was with his dad, like ones that he was sort of help his dad with. Because they said that so many people had fillings in their teeth and this constant like burning of it would release like micro particles of mercury, and you could get, and obviously since the furnace was shit as well. But to be honest,
That's a far stretch.
Yeah, I didn't go much into that.
Cremate.
I thought, I don't know about that, mate. It couldn't have been to save money because they wouldn't have actually saved much money on not cremating them anyway. So there was no evidence and no sign of like necrophilia. So why? When they spoke to Brent's wife, because he was married, she said that Brent for quite a long time had been in a bit of a sort of constant state of like trance, almost like he just wasn't really with it. A bit like he'd mentally checked out.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that there is still possibilities that he did do some cremations, but that the furnace was in such bad shape that there could have been all sorts of gases and things from the bodies that could have been slowly poisoning Brent and sent him a little bit mad.
The fumes from all the
Body
decomposing
fumes.
bodies.
Well,
Not
yeah.
even the ones that he's burnt.
Yeah. The Marsh family faced hundreds of lawsuits. Pretty much every family, bar a handful of forgiving families like Sheila's, they all pressed for like huge lawsuits. But other than that, everyone just wanted to know why. Still, everyone was just still curious as to just why. Like, why do that? Brent sent a letter to all of the families, and they were all the same letter, and it was, "Dear blah blah," and this is a direct quote. "Dear blah blah, I am so sorry for your loss. I wish I had the answers to give you that would put your mind at ease, but I do not. I can only offer you my deepest apology. Someday I pray that you will be able to forgive me for my failure to properly perform my job. Also, I pray you will be able to put an end to this chapter of your life. Please accept my sincerest apologies and my prayers for you. Prayerfully yours, Brent Marsh." I've got to say, Brent was the model prisoner. He was always well behaved. He got no black marks, no like warnings or nothing at all. He worked as a barber in the prison. He got himself a degree, as well as a whole plethora of other certificates and qualifications. And he was actually quoted as someone saying that he got more education in prison than anybody I know.
Oh, wow.
He was hell-bent on educating himself and making himself a better person. He earned himself a remarkable prisoner title. And in a twist that I found out right at the end was that Brent actually had a daughter, and his daughter was born 2 weeks before the discovery of the bodies at Tri-State.
Oh, gosh.
I know. Brent did everything he could for his daughter from prison. He wrote her letters all the time. He checked on her education when it came time for her to start school. He spoke to his wife regarding his daughter all the time. And in June 2016, Brent was released from prison, and his daughter had just turned 14. She was a teenager.
It's a lot of the life to miss, isn't it?
A lot of it, yeah. Brent remained silent about his actions. When he came out of the prison, he was obviously greeted by a horde of press. But as he walked out of the prison, he was just silent, and he just wanted to start his life again as a father this time. So he went to volunteer for a local pastor. And remember Greg again from the GBI?
Remember Greg, yeah.
GBI Greg. He continued all these years. He continued to work the Tri-State case. He's continued to desperately try and identify the rest of the bodies. And over the years, he said that he had a little elderly lady that called him every day asking if they've found her husband's body. And that,
so sad.
it breaks my heart, that does. And Greg said that eventually she stopped calling. She called him every day, every single day. And he said eventually she stopped calling. And he said, the only thing I can think of was that she probably must have died. And she died not knowing if her husband was one of the bodies. So in March 2004, the hundreds of identified bodies were buried. They had a memorial for the unidentified. And weirdly enough, there were also hundreds of abandoned ashes. So there was loads of unidentified bodies, and the ones that were identified. And then do you remember I said about the local crematorium said we will do free and they were like, yeah, that's great. So the bodies then got taken off and actually cremated, and then the families just left them, just never went and collected the ashes, which makes me, being cynical, makes me wonder about some of the families' motives for being like so fucking outraged at Brent.
Compensation.
Absolutely. As for Brent, part of his plea deal was that he would never take any profit from the Tri-State tragedy story. He's also on 63 years probation. The land at Tri-State still belongs to the Marsh family, but it now has a protection order on it so that nothing can ever be built there. A crew demolished the crematorium and they took the furnace away to be destroyed. Brent continues to preach at the local church of Noble. He continues to be a good man, but he continues his silence. The end.
I've just got so many questions.
You and about a million other people, I'm sure.
I'm so baffled by it.
Do you want to know, like, before you decide before you think about what your take on this is going to be, let me just put it to you like this. I think, and I'm not the only one, I think Brent wanted to be a footballer. He was very good at it. I think he had a massive amount of desire to keep his family happy. He came from his grandfather, his great-grandfather started big businesses in Noble that ran for many years. His grandfather did, his father did. They were all really driven men that all made a big splash in the business world and in Noble, and for good reasons. And I think his father having that stroke threw him into a whirlwind of, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to do this, but I feel obligated to do this. My mum's stressing about it. And I think maybe there's a chance that he just didn't want to burn bodies. He didn't want to cremate it. Maybe it gave him the creeps. Maybe it freaked him out. And he thought, I don't want to do this. And I think he very quickly, whilst trying to continue his education, follow his football career, obviously, you know, he had a girlfriend when all this started. I think he thought, I'm busy, or I'm going to a football game or something like that. I haven't got time to do that body. I'll do it in a bit. I'll do it in a couple of days. I'll just put it there for now. And then I think he started getting a backlog.
Yeah.
And only a small backlog. And then I think he got overwhelmed, and I think it snowballed out of control. And I think he was ashamed of what he did. And I think also there was rumours that he had said, the reason that I'm keeping quiet is because I don't want any other attention brought onto my family, because he was very protective over his family. And so I think he just thought, do you know what? I'm going to stay silent. And if I stay silent, then my family's out of like the limelight and all that. But
Yeah.
I think that's what happened. I think he got overwhelmed too quickly and it snowballed out of control.
Yeah, I actually do think that as well. I think that he hasn't got an explanation.
Yeah.
He hasn't got an excuse. He hasn't got a reason, which is why he's
Yeah.
saying, with all the will in the world, I want to tell you what happened. I want to tell you why, but I
Want to
don't know
give you a
why.
reason. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why. And I think that, like you said, it just got on top of him. But then, like a lot of people, he's buried his head. If I don't acknowledge it, it's not happening, and it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. But when you've got your head buried, you don't really think about the consequences because you don't want to think about
you
the
don't want
consequences.
to. Absolutely.
So I think it's just a case of he's buried his head. Perhaps the furnace was breaking down and he had no idea what to do about it, who to contact, and
maybe he didn't have the money. You don't know, do you? I mean, it's possible that his parents could have been like, well, that's in the funds, and he's thought, shit, I spent that.
If he'd have had to say, I can't do this anymore, this people would have found out what he'd been doing. So that's that point where he's just gone, if I just leave it, let it do what it's doing, no one's gonna find out because I'm not, telling anybody. So he's just tried to.
There's a whole load of like shoulda, woulda, coulda with this case. Do you know what I mean? If he'd have just got to the point where he'd been overwhelmed with, I don't know, 20 or 30 bodies, and he thought, geez, they're all in the like fucking woods and in the shed and all that. In hindsight, he should have said,
I need help.
What? I'm not going to take any more bodies.
Yeah.
Because I need to deal with this backlog. And and
but
maybe
it's having that state of mind to do that as well. If you're in a bit of a depression, which it sounds like he possibly was, if he's going about in a blur, if he's in a state of depression, just doesn't care.
No. And apparently when his father had the stroke and had to step away, apparently Brent's uncle was supposed to come and help him at the crematory, but he walked out and left Brent on his own because he said he refused to work for someone, even though it was like his nephew, his family, that was 30 years younger than him.
Yeah.
He thought it was disrespectful. So he left. And it's like, that was Brent's only help.
Yeah.
It's not like he had a load of brothers that were all like, we're doing this as a family and we'll all do it together, because he didn't. And it's like, I think he was just shoved into this world that he didn't really want.
The cremation side of things, I don't think it's a one person business, is it? It's not something you can do by yourself. And I think also his dad's had a stroke, which has altered his life massively. He's probably having to care for him as well, because he's got a very elderly mother.
Yeah.
So he's probably having to care for his dad, and just he can't run his own life and stuff. So I think you're right. I think he just started getting behind and then further behind, and then he's just buried his head.
But I mean, can we just acknowledge the amazing person that is Sheila? Because what a thing. I really admire people that can forgive.
I am that person. I am that person to go,
well, I admire you, mate.
What must they be going through as well for that reason to be happening? You don't know what they're thinking or what their thoughts are or why they're doing the things that they're doing. I am very much that person, and I think it just comes from a level of empathy, in that sometimes I don't.
Yeah, I think sometimes like
suffering.
I think my empathy gets like confused sometimes, because I think I get outraged for people. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, listen to how he's speaking to her. Listen to how's that going to make her feel? That he's making her feel like shit. And then that gives me the absolute rage. And then I feel that I have to get vengeance, not justice. I need to get vengeance on behalf of that person. Do you know what I mean? And I think, no, like, I feel like people that are like that are are bullies and all that. But like Claire does talk me round like a lot of the time, but it's just whether or not Claire's there and whether or not I've got the time to actually calm my tits down before I actually like flip a switch. But yeah,
It just depends, I think, on your emotions, because I'm not an angry person, so anger isn't my first go-to emotion. If something like that was to happen, I'd be very, very upset. But then I like to understand why that could have happened, and I think I would have a very similar approach to good old Sheila.
I know she was great, and I've honestly I've taken so much from like Sheila's way of explaining it, and she's like, well, do you know what, like maybe, just maybe, it was like this and it was like this,
It
and
wasn't
then
malicious.
and for her to turn around and say, listen, I'm not going to be able to heal until I've let go of that. I can't hold on to that hate and that anger,
because she would never have got answers. Because he didn't have any answers to give.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I really admire her for being like that, and I will try to be more Sheila.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean to say that, you know, people aren't within their right to feel anger, because absolutely, you know, the hold on to that for as long as you want to hold on to that, if that's your coping mechanism. But for some people it's just different. But
I would feel like that as well. If I was one of the family members, I would like to be like Sheila. But I think I can also see a lot of me in, like, just say
you would have been the dagger
you didn't want to
cane.
do it. No, I would. Yeah,
you would have been the dagger cane lady.
I would. But yeah, just from my point of view, I'm like, just say you couldn't do it.
I know,
that irritates me. Don't tell me that you're going to do something and then not do it, and then give me excuses as to why you haven't fucking done it. If you're not going to do it, tell me you're not going to do it, or you haven't got time. Don't mug me off.
Don't mug me off. The thing is, you think how you think. So when you question someone else's reasons, or someone else's for, you know, reasons for doing anything, you question it with your brain. You don't question it with their brain. You have no idea what they're thinking or why they've done the things that they've done.
Yeah, but that's why I'm shouting. Because
that's good.
You see it from my point of view, not you, them. You know, like,
I think, but as a person that has changed massively over the years, I've been the person where I've buried my head and not wanted to acknowledge a problem. I've been the person that's been too scared to speak up or to say I can't do that for fear of the repercussions. So I've been that person, and now I'm the person, I don't give a fuck about the repercussions. So I have had a massive scale of development, and so I can massively see from somebody else's perspective why they haven't done that thing, because it might be too painful. You know, when people say, like, especially with the Menendez brothers case, why didn't they just leave? He was an 18-year-old man essentially being raped by his dad, and they all went, well, he could have just left.
Do you know what that irritates?
You can't just
as well.
You can't say that with your brain. Your brain hasn't been conditioned in the way that Menendez brother has been conditioned. So when you've got an opinion that's based on your thoughts, your behaviors, your rationale, so I don't feel like you can question massively someone else's.
It's not for anyone else to question. It's not up to someone else to say, well, why didn't you just leave? It's like, okay, are you me?
Yeah, exactly.
Were you in that situation?
Yeah.
No, then shush.
But that's the same for this guy. Why didn't you just tell someone you wasn't coping? Or why didn't you just do this? There's a reason that he hasn't done that, and whether you understand that or not is a different. No, I don't particularly understand it either. But when you're in that situation, everybody does things very differently.
You just don't know, do you? I can honestly, through the help of Sheila, I was able, because to do this 180 and think, actually, I would have been Team Sheila. I would have been with Sheila and said, do you know what? I don't think you're a bad person.
I think it would have taken you a long time to get to that point.
Yeah. Yeah, it would. Mm.
I think
Yeah.
with all in the world, you'd like to
But
think.
I do. But then I also feel very different about like death and like your physical body as opposed to your spiritual soul, spirit, whatever it is. But I separate those two. So I am very much well, I like it as a respect thing. I think it's respectful and it's clean and it's neat and tidy, as in, when you're finished with your body, you go and you're cremated and you're either scattered or you're put in something.
It's just like a final, isn't it?
Something's wrong. Say something.
Hello.
Oh, it's all right now. Yeah, you went all robotic. Yeah, I've got my mum's ashes. They're literally right there. But I don't associate that as my mum. It's weird. It's like I see it as like almost sort of freeing up that space. My mum has left her body. I still associated her body as the thing that I would cuddle and the thing that I would kiss and the thing that used to put me to bed at night and stroke my hair and and things like that. But I don't think of that as in that container.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's I feel differently about it. I think I would have, I don't know, but I do think, I would like to think anyway, that I would have been able to forgive Brent and just said, do you know what? I get it. It's not like he went out of his way to do horrible things with the bodies.
Yeah.
He just put them
We're storing them.
somewhere. Yeah. And just thought, I don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
Who knows why he didn't just do what I said, a moment ago and just say, do you know what? I'm just going to catch up and then it'll be all right.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Don't know.
Don't know.
But let us know what you think, though.
Let us know, guys.
That was very perplexing.
A very perplexing, wasn't it?
Yes.
Mm.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome.
Cool.
All
All
right.
right. Well, then, I'll see you on the next one.
Yeah. All right. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
If you have enjoyed listening to our episodes, make sure you rate us and leave us a review on whatever platform you are listening.
We absolutely love hearing from you guys. So you can also help support our show by donating to our Buy Me a Coffee link. We will make sure that you get a massive shout out and a big thank you in our next week's episode.
You can also follow us on social media at Perplexed Podcasts. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and if you want to see more videos and blooper reels, subscribe to our TikTok and YouTube channels.
You can also email us your stories at perplexedpodcasts@gmail.com.
And you can find all the relevant links in the episode descriptions. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, bless you.
Oi.
Bless you. That's enough. Fucking
Jesus
hell.
Christ. Now it's brought on a hot flash. Because
Jesus
I don't know
Christ.
if I made this apparent. I'm going through the menopause. Walks
Go
there.
and get your blanket.
Go and get that shit on.